Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars-loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows, while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
And I'm Charles Rogers, and happy Pride Month, everyone. It's the 1 month that corporations acknowledge we exist.
Happy Corporate Rainbow Month.
Happy Corporate Rainbow Month. It's our favorite month of the year.
Where Target sells offensive rainbow jumpsuits and
oh Lord, I think it was the putting the hashtag on there that really oversold. I walk into the Target, they're front and center. These suits are front and center. These rainbow suits. Now some of the shirts I will say that they've got there, I've thought some of them are pretty cute.
Yeah, they're not bad. I think it's just, I just find it offensive when I see these, literally what's I'm assuming is supposed to be a business suit, but it's all rainbow, but it has shorts instead of pants. And then it's just offensive to look at. So I don't even think a real gay person would never wear it. So I can only assume that the only person who's going to wear it is that one straight guy at a party who's a quote unquote ally of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I can't think of anybody else who would wear it.
I think the tackiness for me, the suit is bad enough on its own.
Right.
The tackiness to me is slapping the corporate hashtag on top of it. Yeah. And I'm just ugh.
I don't like it. Here's what I want. I want them to get a focus group together of actual homosexuals from all aspects of the alphabet mafia. And I want all of them to have an input on one design. So you can have 2 or 3 gays go, okay, we're going to make 1, 2, or 3, gay shirts, general gay shirts. And then you can have a couple lesbians design a couple lesbian shirts. And then you can have a couple trans people.
That would be neat.
That's what they need to do.
That'd be neat. Yeah. Because they could also showcase queer designers, but it's Target, so they won't do that.
That's what they should do.
They should do.
They should say, hey, design competition, right? Submit your design for the Target t-shirt competition, Pride Month, whatever. And then people can vote on it and bullshit. Then you have the social engagement. Then you have all that shit that they love. So it'll work out.
It's it's still corporate as fuck, but at least it would be elevating queer voices and in some way. I personally would prefer that corporations acknowledge we exist the other 11 months when we're not a marketable demographic. That would be awesome. But
I feel like I'm less likely to buy gay stuff during Pride Month than I am any other.
I already own all my gay stuff. That's the thing.
That's true.
I don't need to buy more. I already own it. I bought it the other 11 months out of the year.
And what's funny is Target always puts it in the generally same section, which is, since it's during the month of June, it's also in the Father's Day section. So you have the Father's Day gift, the shitty Father's Day gifts next to the Pride stuff. And then that's kind of next to that is the leftover St. Patrick's Day stuff because they couldn't get rid of it.
It's gifts for dad and gifts for daddy.
Right.
That's how it works. Coming into Pride Month, I just want to say that we aren't doing any special episodes or anything for Pride Month, but we are relatively active on our social media. I just want to give a shout out. We were on a list of queer content creators on the Star Wars Explained live stream the other day. So I wanted to send a huge thank you out to Alex and Molly Damon for including us on that. And also the post that I made on Twitter drew my attention to a lot of queer content creators that I hadn't discovered until then. So I've actually been trying to catch up on some of these queer other podcasters and other content creators that I'm just now discovering exist, thanks to the post that I made on the original Star Wars Explained tweet. This week, I've been listening to Pink Milk, which is I love the name.
I love the name. That's hilarious.
It's a pair of husbands that do a couple of Star Wars podcasts. And then I also, this week, I'm going to be listening to a few episodes of Force Friends Rewatch, who do kind of the same thing we do, where they watch specific episodes of TV shows.
Gotcha.
But I think they do it more of a retrospective, whereas we're doing the ones that are airing right now.
Gotcha.
So I'm definitely going to be checking them out this week. But if you follow our Twitter at Goldsquadrongays, I'm retweeting a bunch of episodes of these queer content creators that are coming out. It's the good thing about being between jobs is I have tons of time to listen to these podcasts.
You got stuff to do.
So this week, Bradley gets to join the ranks of the people who are wrong about their Star Wars Bad Batch episode predictions. Welcome to the club, Bradley.
You know what? I was riding so high on and my wings started to melt this week as I flew too close to the sun.
Oh, so you can read.
No, I just understand references from literature.
Uh-huh. He gets non-twinks to tell him about these things so he can sound smart.
Right.
This week, the episode is called Decommissioned. What did you think of the episode, Bradley? Let's start with that.
Good episode overall. It's a lot of action. It was kind of like a pretty quick episode too. It felt like not like last week where it felt like they only really had one tiny little thing they had to do during the whole episode. This one I felt like it was a little bit more. I was a little more engaged, but that's possibly because of the return of characters we've already known. So I don't know if that had to do anything with it. Because last week was more kind of like just brand new stuff the whole time. So I don't know.
This really is like a sequel to Clone Wars. Like I made a note at one point. I was like, this really is the Clone Wars sequel series. Because we've had Onderon, we've had the Zygerians last week. Now we have other new characters that are returning.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really is just following up. I think really only the episode on like the deserted moon. No, because they even went back to Onderon in that one.
Right.
So like all these, this really is like the Clone Wars sequel. I loved it. I'd put it mid to high on my ranking thus far. I should probably be keeping an official ranking somewhere.
No, I guess I didn't think of that. I'd be like, what's your overall rating of the episode?
What's your overall rating of the episode?
Yeah.
Well, because this one was more about themes and it was about necessarily advancing the plot.
Right.
Per se. Which I did like. As long as the episode has a point, even though, they kind of wind up where they started with, they have no new information. We as the audience have new information.
Right.
But they don't. So we open up on Ord Mantell again, outside of Sid's place, which it looks like Sid's place is going to kind of be our base of operations.
Yeah, I noted that she's back, and I was like, oh, that's nice that she's back, because I was hoping she would return, but I didn't realize she's going to be our kind of, not our quest master, but you know what I mean? Like very much like they have to keep coming back to her to move the plot forward.
She's a walking job board.
Yeah.
They have to come to her and do the job and then solve that week's problem, and that helps them gradually move the plot forward.
Yeah, well, I enjoy her, so I'm glad to see her back.
It is delightful. We see Omega kind of trying to learn to use the light bow.
I noted that they keep doing this thing, which is that they introduce something in the episode but they don't use it or reference it until the second episode. So it's kind of like weird that we introduced the light bow last week, but now we're going to use it. Now we're going to practice with it.
Well, it almost kind of is building each episode, sort of building on each other.
Yeah.
So, she screws up something in some episode, and then the next episode we see them kind of learning how to, it's a character progression arc. It's not necessarily, a static thing. We've seen her progression as a character even between episodes 1 and 6.
Right.
So we see her learning to fire this light bow. She's not very good at it. Echo tells her she's got to learn to tune out distractions. Sid shows up and is like, hey, nerds, I got a job for you. And because you're my bitches now,
right?
You're going to go and do it. So she sends them to Corelia to get a tactical droid.
So the second they said Corelia, which my notes auto-corrected to Cornelia, um, so I was like, they're going to college. But I saw Corelia and I was like, oh no, are they going to do young Han Solo in this
That's
episode?
what I thought because I saw the episode. I went in through the actual episode description. Remember last week we talked about going in through the main page through going in through the episode.
Yeah.
I went in through the episode. It mentioned they encountered smugglers, and I went, "Oh, we're gonna do
A young Han
young Han
Solo.
and young Kira," which would have been interesting considering the major revelations in the comic this week.
Yeah, I was.
Bradley has no idea what I just mentioned, but I'm sure some people in the audience went, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about."
Oh, I don't know comic book wise what you're talking about, but I was trying to figure out timeline wise, like where in the timeline does Solo like overlap with this show? Because I was trying to figure that out.
Solo's
It can't be too much.
7 or 8 years in the future.
It is okay.
Like I think he's like about 10
Now,
during Revenge of the Sith. So if this is a few months later,
right? He could be like maybe 11-ish.
He's maybe 11-ish at the time that this takes place.
So would we argue that he's about the same age as Omega at this point? If she's
he would be about the same age as Omega. Okay. Actually, if we assume we don't know how old she is,
right, but we can assume she's.
We also don't know if she's a fast-growing clone. That's the thing,
right? But just visually, she is in that 10 or 11, 12 range,
right?
So,
which is also the target demo of the show. Funny enough.
Course, ha ha ha! Clever of Lucasfilm.
Clever of them to include a character that's exactly in the age range of kids who are going to be watching this show. But of course, it is a kids franchise for kids about magic space wizards. So
I thought that when they went to Corelia, that I genuinely thought they were going to run into young Han and young Kira running for the gang. And I thought I was like, oh, that's what they're doing this episode.
I thought exactly the same thing. And it turned out obviously not to be the case, as we will get to, but
right.
That's where I thought.
But I was this close. I was like, oh my God, they're going to.
I was like, if they do I'm going to be vague about it in case people haven't managed to read the comic yet.
Mm-hmm.
If they do the timing of the revelation at the end of the first War of the Bounty Hunters comic on the same week that we see a young Han and Kira on Corelia, that'd be some wild cross-brand timing.
Mm.
That'd be some absolutely wild stuff, but they did not actually
right.
have Han and Kira. So it's just totally coincidental that we went to Corelia the same week. We see Sid use the light bow, and Sid gives some advice, which does not ultimately end up coming up later in the episode, but also is shown to be proficient with the light bow, and she interrupts Tech, and when he interrupts her brief, I just love Sid.
Yeah.
I just love her so much.
I really like that she did that with the energy bow. She was like, yeah, you just don't have enough power. And she was just like, boom, boom, boom. I was like, oh, she's proficient. Okay. Damn.
Sid is a wonderful. She has like this old over it queen energy to her that like she's like one of these like older drag queens who's like been around the block a few times and just does not have time for your shit anymore. I love it.
I agree.
As we're coming up to the planet, we see that the Bad Batch has attached themselves underneath a transport, and that's how they're sneaking in. Little reference that Bradley's not going to get, but I've mentioned ever since the trailers because I love it. The cargo ship design is very similar to that of the Legacy Run, the destruction of which is the inciting incident for the entire High Republic era. So that was a neat little nod for me to have that in there. Bradley's giving me one of those looks like, can you stop bringing up the High Republic at every fucking opportunity? We get it. You love this whole thing.
I don't even know.
I don't even know
who the High Republic is. Who is she?
Well, if we get down to launching some video content and we ultimately nail ourselves an Audible sponsorship, Bradley, I will get you the audiobooks for the High Republic so that your dumb illiterate twink ass can actually
that sounds great. You know what? That's right. Audible, please. Right? I'm here now. Please sponsor us so that I can get a free subscription to Audible so I can listen to the High Republic on audiobook so that I can educate myself, because I just can't see myself unless I go like
spare a thought for the twinks who can't read.
Right. Unless I could just go to Target and stand in the book aisle and just kind of like flip through the book real quick, like, and just go like, all right, let's see what happens in this book.
I mean, they might do a comic adaptation. I remember you read the Thrawn comic adaptation.
That's right. Well, whoa, that's correct. I started the comic.
Okay, he started the comic.
I never finished it, but I did read more in the first Thrawn book than I ever read in the comics. But it was basically the same.
And also, Thrawn is gay culture. That's why we included him in our graphic.
Yes, he is definitely in there.
Fun fact about that graphic. So Bradley's 3 hours ahead of me. So I will often, when there's something that needs to be addressed, it's like noon, 1 p.m, his time by the time I'm waking up. So I woke up to that graphic in my inbox and looked at it, pulled it up and looked at it. I was like, why is Ray Sloan on here? So that was one of my pieces of feedback. I was like, why is Ray Sloan on here? And he linked me to the Pride Month cover articles. And that's how I discovered that Ray Sloan is a member of the LGBT community, which I didn't know, but that's your fun fact for the behind the scenes for the day. Right. I discovered that when Bradley sent me that Pride Month graphic for approval.
And just for clarity reasons, that may or may not be a character you think is going to show up in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, correct?
That is a character that I do believe is going to show up. It may or may not show up in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So we head in, we land, we're going to go in on foot, because obviously. They use an interesting exploit with the droids, where they say, okay, the police droids are going to have this blind spot, which almost kind of highlights an issue with using droids over people, because droids are extremely predictable. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to point out that was kind of a cool little detail. They head in. Hunter is divvying up the tasks. And I want to point out there's a specific point where Wrecker says, he assigns Wrecker to keep lookout. And Wrecker goes, well, that was always Crosshair's job. Up until this moment, it always felt like the team was complete. It never really felt like Crosshair was missing until this particular mission, where it suddenly kind of starts to feel like, okay, there is a missing component to this team.
Yeah, like they needed him for his expertise, which Wrecker does seem to do a good job of later on, but only like last minute, whereas Crosshair probably would have been a little bit more proficient and on alert the whole time.
You can see how the mission would have gone easier if Crosshair had been present.
Right.
Which does highlight... And his presence, too, is felt in this series, even though he's only been in 2 episodes thus far.
It's weird, right? Because I almost forget sometimes that he's a part of the Bad Batch. You know what I mean? Because they have kind of made it like, oh, where did he go? He's gone. Like, they haven't really included him in the last couple episodes, so it's kind of been a little weird. I feel like if we don't see him next episode, it'll be a mistake on the show's part, because where they reference him in this episode, I definitely think we need to have just some kind of appearance. Otherwise, people are going to start to forget him, And they
reference him pretty much every episode. I think that Rampage was the only one where he didn't at least get mentioned in some capacity. Because I know they mentioned that the wrist communicator that Omega uses was actually his, but
gotcha.
So over the course of them, they locate the head. Omega locates the head, but someone grabs it and runs off with it.
Oh no, mystery person.
And then somebody else encounters Omega. Who could it possibly be? Well, the person who confronts Omega turns out to be Rafa Martez. And the person holding the head turns out to be Trace Martez. It's not Han and Kira, it's the Martez sisters.
Yeah, and see, again, they faked us out because they had two people. And I was like, it's Han and Kira stealing for what's her face?
Lady Proxima.
Lady Proxima. I was like, they're trying to get it for Lady Proxima because for some reason she needs a droid head. You know what I mean? And I'm glad they kind of included these two because, well, one, the show definitely needs a boost of female energy because it's tough when half your characters are the same male genetics.
And also the same male template and the same male voice actor. Right. Shout out D. Bradley Baker, who is carrying this entire series on his back.
Which is fine and impressive, but it's also at the same time like, okay, I think honestly that might be why like Sid is a female. Why? They're trying to put in female characters when they can.
Which is great.
Yeah.
We talked about, I remember we talked about in Mando, where in episode 3, you had kind of gotten the impression that they were pushing the new female characters pretty hard in terms of their competency. And I had said, I think it's getting that sense because the old Star Wars content hadn't been really great with its female representation.
Right.
And as the universe expands and we get to see more women, more people of color, more LGBT people, it's going to become less and less like that's something that needs to, so there's going to be less something that stands out.
Right.
So it is awesome that the show is including more people of color and more female characters who are diverse female characters. I don't think we've seen any LGBT characters in the Bad Batch yet.
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of.
That have been confirmed or not.
They could do like watch them be confirmed in like some book somewhere down the line. That always happens.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely said that, and especially with the Rafa and Trace character, because when I was watching Clone Wars, Ahsoka always has seemed to me to be like kind of this bisexual energy anyway, and so I think that I don't want to say like her sisterly connection, but her feminine connection to Trace in the last season of Clone Wars was definitely that kind of like, oh, maybe they could end up being like a couple at some point. You know what I mean? Like,
fun fact, the Martez sisters actually replaced in the original conception for that arc in the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. The Martez sisters actually replaced a male character who was supposed to be kind of a love interest for Ahsoka. Mm. So, I mean, that tracks.
Well, because also in the original Clone Wars, when Ahsoka and her friend
Barriss,
that was already like, are they friends? Are they more than friends kind of thing? Like it was just a hint.
Well,
it wasn't too much,
the High Republic has established that Padawans are allowed to have relationships with each other and
right.
Can't get attached. So, maybe there was something there. I'm glad that they replaced that character with the two sisters.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that now the two sisters have come back. We'll get to it a little bit later on, but there's even been some character development with them.
Well, and I'm glad that they did use these sister characters too, because if they had given Ahsoka some male love interest, I would have been so fucking done with Ahsoka. I would have been like, no, she does not fall in love with some random ass dude. That's not fucking her story. I don't like that. No, I
love the idea of like Ahsoka having this bisexual energy because the more people tell this to me, people have been telling it to me for years, and every time I'm like, yeah, she kind of does.
It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Rafa pulls some pretty classic Rafa, where she convinces Omega to put the light bow down and then knocks it out of her hand.
Right.
Which is a very Rafa thing to do. This is where I noted that this really is just a sequel to Clone Wars. Yeah. That every episode they're bringing back more stuff, which I'm down for. Rebels kind of function. I have later on in the show that Rebels, this kind of functions as a nice in-between because it's sort of a spiritual predecessor to Rebels, but also kind of a direct sequel to the Clone Wars that picks up some of the stuff that we were kind of wondering after the Clone Wars. What happened to Cut and what happened to, all this stuff? And they're answering some of these questions.
Right. I was sorry, I was looking up the voice actress for Rafa, and because I just like her voice. I don't know. I was like, what is it about her? I'm trying to like look her up and see if I've seen her in anything else, and I haven't, which is strange because I really like her voice, and she's voiced by Elizabeth Rodriguez, but I don't know what she's from. Oh, she's from Orange is the New Black. That's what she is. Okay.
What character did she play in Orange is the New Black?
She plays okay, God, I haven't watched the show in so long. But she's the mother of the Diaz character. The girl who's pregnant.
Oh, okay.
She plays the mom, and that's why I was like, I know her voice from somewhere. Orange is the New Black.
Yeah. Okay. God, I haven't thought about. I stopped watching that show after the prison riot arc. I watched like 2 episodes of season 6 and just kind of fell off of it.
Yeah, I lose interest, but now I know it's her. I'm like, oh, I got it. I was like, okay,
gotcha.
Now I never have to watch the episode again where I'm like, who the fuck is voicing this character? I mean, yes, I could have just looked it up on IMDb, like,
fingers
a year
crossed.
ago,
fingers crossed she shows up again.
That's right. Well, once it gets to the end, I think she might.
So Wrecker has a chance to show off some skills this episode where he shoots some of the police droids from his kind of crow's nest.
Mm-hmm.
So we are getting to see, I talked about in previous episodes, I wanted to see Wrecker do something besides just punch things or be strong. This episode really shows off different skills that he manages to hit the target from far away with not a sniper rifle. So we see that he's accurate. We'll later see that he's strategic in his fighting style.
Mm-hmm.
I also noted here that Rafa and Hunter kind of meet up on the catwalk, and Hunter's shooting droids, and there's a sequence where Rafa goes to shoot, looks like she's going to shoot Hunter, and he dodges out of the way. She's actually shot a droid. She's gotten really good at shooting a blaster.
Yeah, I'm wondering like what's going on there too. Like you said, there's some character development here that we didn't see in between Clone Wars and now. So I'm wondering if, because where do we leave them off? I guess that's important to note because I forget the very last thing we see.
We leave them off in, if we'd had more time between recording this episode and actually the Bad Batch episode coming out, I would have rewatched the Clone Wars. I really just need to rewatch Clone Wars.
I've only watched it one time. You know what I mean? I didn't like ever.
I watched it twice through. We leave them back at the shop. Ahsoka had gone through their arc in that, and Ahsoka had ended up like leading them more toward the path of doing the right thing and helping people. But I can't remember the specifics of exactly how that episode. Bo-Katan shows up to do Bo-Katan things. It's really vague. I remember them ending with like a hopeful note, so it is good to see it continue in this show.
Yeah, I remember they were doing some kind of like illegal stuff, or
they were doing a spice run, and
that's right.
Like the whole plot of it was like Trace dumps the spice because Rafa is like, we need to do the job, and Ahsoka's like, that's literally drugs.
Right.
And then they have to do a whole thing where they escape from the Pikes, and I have to rewatch because I don't remember exactly how it ends.
Gotcha.
Getting back to the show that we're watching.
Yeah, I know. We always tangent on stupid stuff.
We always tangent.
But at least it's about characters that are in this episode and not like random stuff. You know what I mean?
I did not go off on another tangent again.
Right.
Trace gets the droid head back. There's a lot of action that we're skipping over with the droid head going from one place to another and people are shooting. I'm skipping over a bunch of it. But Trace gets the droid head back and Omega gets trapped on the conveyor belt. And it's interesting that Trace leaves her and then hears her crying out a scene later and turns around and comes back. Whereas the Trace, so it's almost kind of like Rafa's softened a bit. Trace is kind of hardened a bit because she does come back for Omega, but she was going to leave her on the conveyor belt in the first place. In between those two, this is the bit that I really want to talk about. We have nothing that I know of that we got wrong last week. Yay. But as we did record last week's episode very quickly, in between Bradley's debaucherous New York vacation, which I'm sure all manner of things were happening that he's not telling us about. We did actually miss on the last episode because we recorded it so fast. There was a sequence where Wrecker kind of touches his head and Hunter's like, "What's wrong?" And Hunter's like, Wrecker's like, "It's nothing." We did skip over that. So it was a reference last week. This week, something happens to his head again.
Right.
And the chip starts to activate.
Right, because
he starts quoting, saying "good soldiers," which are the first bit of the mantra that they have.
And I noted, so like you said, last week we didn't mention that, but I think the week before, too, he said something along the lines of, like, I have a headache.
It's been brought up every week since he hit his head.
Right.
Since he hit his head when they were crashing into the planet.
Gotcha.
But this week the chip is actually starting to activate because he fights through it.
Right, at the end, yeah.
But it's starting to activate because like he repeats "good soldiers" over and over again, and then he hears Crosshair's voice saying "good soldiers follow orders."
Gotcha.
So this is a progressive thing that's happening.
Does not look like it's going to bode well, but we'll see.
That's a big yikes. So he's taken out of commission for a bit, and while he's out of commission, we get a sequence that kind of echoes the Attack of the Clones conveyor belt, the droid factory, where the thing is moving, and Trace comes back, and Trace has to rescue. Trace rescues Omega. Ultimately, they concoct a plan to use the droid leg, which Trace is always kind of a decent planner, but here we see Rafa mentions that Trace had some input into this plan, or it was her plan in general, and we see her come up on the fly with using the droid leg to pull, or at least to hold Omega up so that Hunter can get there.
Yeah, again, this is one of those things where you can't put one of the main characters in immediate danger and make me think that, oh, they're gonna die. It's just like Padme in the droid factory, where they keep showing the opening and closing of the molten lava, and you keep thinking like, oh, she's gonna get covered in lava and she's gonna die, and R2-D2 saves her at the last second. It's the same thing here. We know Omega's not gonna die. We know Omega's not gonna fall in the fucking lava. Like, it does take away from the action just slightly, for me at least, because again, like, we are, trying to analyze the fuck out of this. For a child, obviously, they don't fucking know. They're gonna
they're gonna hear the music, the tense music, and see the scary visuals. It doesn't, to me, detract from it too much, knowing that, okay, obviously they're not just gonna randomly kill one of the characters of the show, and also like a child. This is not Revenge of the Sith.
Now, if you had told me, like, if you had made that, like, not Omega, and you had made that another character, then I would have maybe believed the suspense a little bit. Because clearly, like, with the beginning of the season, with Crosshair kind of turning, and then also now Wrecker kind of being like, oh, maybe he's also something's going to happen to him. Like, I'm getting the sense that maybe the Bad Batch is, like, dispensable, whereas Omega is not. So it's kind of like one of those things like, oh, maybe one of them will go away. We don't know.
I mean, maybe, it's certainly possible. I want to shout out the music cue when Hunter pulls her up. Every time we have Clayton on the show, which we did a couple of weeks ago, I always spend a lot of time thinking about the music for several weeks afterwards. Because that's one of his big things. He didn't mention it on the last episode he was on. But the musical cue, the little Bad Batch light, shout out to the Kiners, who are the kind of unsung, pun not intended, gems of the Clone Wars. The Kiner brothers who do the music for the Clone Wars. they do some awesome music, and they do it for this show. They do the music for this show as well. So we rescue Omega. There's kind of a, now Bradley, you're versed in your TV history. There's kind of a who's on first sequence, like a brief, the Abbott and Costello. I'm sure you had to watch it when you were in school. I don't know if they showed it in any of the classes we were in. You're blanking. You're completely blank. You have no idea what I'm talking about. I could see him in the Zoom call just absolutely staring at me like, what in God's name are you on about?
You are not speaking basic right now. You are speaking Huttese, and I don't know what you're saying.
Duwanawanga. So the Who's on First sequence is a fairly famous Abbott and Costello sketch that involves baseball players. And I'm going to explain the joke. The joke is that the characters on the runners on the bases are named like who, what, so the joke is who's on first, and then the answer is who. That's kind of the back and forth. It's one of the greatest sequences in comedy history. Gotcha. We get one of those sequences where they say, is there an echo in here?
Oh,
hi,
okay.
I'm Echo.
I didn't know what part you were talking about.
I'm Echo.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Okay. You're right. It was actually pretty funny. I really actually, I liked when she's like, I'm Echo. She's like, oh, really?
Is there an echo in here? Yes. I'm Echo. Really?
Okay.
Great little comedy moment.
Yeah, that was good. I did like that.
Wrecker overcomes his chip activation and jumps down. And for the first time since his episodes on the Clone Wars, we actually see him like take down like a whole squadron of these droids. Mm-hmm. And he's like shooting them and tossing them around. And it's actually awesome.
Yeah, he's finally being himself. He's like back to...
They're letting him like
do his thing,
actually fight things in the way that he fights it, which he just comes in like a complete wrecking ball and just destroys everything. Mm-hmm. But they come up with a plan to activate the droids, and they manage to activate them. Tech kind of sticks a thing in that will become relevant later. But they activate the droids, and the B1s activate, and the super battle droids activate, and they attack. But when they start speaking, I have in my notes, oh, hi, Matthew Wood.
I think people hated the droid talk in the Clone Wars TV show. I think it's one of the best parts of the TV show because it's so stupid.
It's interesting they're gaining autonomy. Like, if you watch the show, they start out very basic, uniform. And then over the course of the Clone Wars, they're giving the droids more personality.
Yes, I definitely noticed that because, if you watch, like, for example, if you watch Phantom Menace, they're very, like, basic. They don't do much. It's just very, like, fire, march forward. Like, it's very, like, basic computer, whatever. And then, yes, in the Clone Wars TV show, they're very kind of quirky and like, oh, are we supposed to be here right now? Like, or
that's a stunningly good battle droid that you just did.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I should voice the moving forward.
We wouldn't want to take it away from, and I'm going to shout out here, doing a lot of creator shout outs today. Shout out Matthew Wood, who I did not mention. I was 99% sure he voiced Bib Fortuna in the last episode, but again, we recorded the last episode very, very fast.
Right.
So I did not have time to check on that. But shout out Matthew Wood. He voiced Bib Fortuna in the last episode. He played Bib Fortuna in The Mandalorian.
That's
he
right.
voices the battle droids in the Clone Wars in here. And famously, he is the voice of General Grievous.
Love that.
He is the voice of General Grievous.
If only we could bring General Grievous back for this show.
I love me some General Grievous. It's one of the rare cases where I prefer the Legends portrayal of him. I get why, because he was always intended to be like a Saturday morning cartoon villain.
Yeah.
But I really liked the moral ambiguity to his backstory in Legends. I thought they went a little too dark with him during the actual Clone Wars themselves, but I really liked his backstory.
I would have liked to see like okay, I always think of him as like an old kind of man by the point of Revenge of the Sith. So I would like to see like a younger General Grievous where he's like healthy and he actually like can breathe, you know? Like it would be interesting to see if like they
back when he was actually a Kalish warrior. I mean, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe
see his turn
we'll
to
go back and
yeah.
Maybe they'll do a show that's actually set between episodes 1 and 2 at some point, or
yeah, because we really don't get a lot of that.
We get some backstory in season 1 of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Some of his new backstory where, you know, he's just a warrior who gradually replaced parts of himself with cybernetics so that he could be a better fighter. But that's really kind of all we get. Legends had a much more intense backstory for him. But
well, all that being said, I love the battle droids. I love prequel droids.
Yes.
I think they're great.
Shout out Matthew Wood. Another man of many voices,
right?
On working for Lucasfilm. So they escape. Omega manages to actually she gets the light bow back, and she manages to use it successfully. Interesting, she took Echo's advice and not Sid's.
The distraction thing.
The distraction thing.
Yeah.
So it turned out she could fire it once she tuned out the distraction
stuff. Right. Yeah, it's kind of like that back in. It's almost like the advice is like kind of, well, you don't have to have any skill if you have power. So that's what Sid was kind of saying. And then like Tech was basically telling her, Echo was telling her, no, you need to practice. And if you practice, you'll actually be so good at this, you don't have to think about it anymore. It's just instinct.
Well, you know, she also may or may not have the Force, so.
We'll see. I don't know.
We'll see. So they escape. They flee on Trace and Rafa's ship, the Silver Angel, which we remember from the Clone Wars. I was glad to see it still operational. Very spiritual prequel. This was where I had noted that it felt like a spiritual prequel to Rebels as well. Because they have this conversation where Trace and Rafa are like, we were going to steal that data to like give to somebody who's fighting back against the Empire. And the clones are we got to do our job that we were hired to do. And it harkens back to some of the early Rebels conflicts of ideology that we get.
Right.
I also thought it was interesting showing Rafa's development from the Clone Wars, because had she not met Ahsoka, she would probably have the same mentality as they did. As they do, where, well, let's do the job, because that's the mentality she has in the Clone Wars. But, you know, her interactions with Ahsoka have turned her away from that path, and now she's taking this job to actually try to help people.
So we think.
So we think. Well, we don't. We'll get to that in just a second. Hunter does end up giving Rafa the tactical droids intel. And she's like, well, maybe you are, you know, one of the good guys after all. I'm sure Sid will have something to say about this in the next episode. But he does hand it over, and she gives it over to what's going to be our talking point for the week. Okay. I'm sure there's going to be...
I have plenty of stuff.
There's going to be, for a very brief sequence, Rafa contacts whoever it is that hired them for the job, who we briefly see in hologram. And she explains that she has the tactical droid's intel, and she tells this mysterious person about the clone troopers. And that's where our episode ends, with her telling this mysterious contact about the clones. And I went, I'm going to have to hear about this on Twitter all fucking week, aren't I?
Yeah, the theories are flying. I'm not even kidding you. I was just typing in, usually for Instagram, I like to get a screen grab of the episode. So I just typed in Bad Batch episode 6 or whatever it was on Google. And literally it was like every Screen Rant article is already posted. Like, who is the contact that the last people we see at the end of the episode? Is it Darth Maul? Like, question mark? Like, is all kinds of stuff. I was like, oh my God.
Facebook feed is going to be, because I post so much about these clickbait article sites.
Yeah, they all post up to you.
Particularly one in particular that it goes beyond clickbait and that I despise with every fiber of my being.
Right.
Facebook suddenly thinks I want to see all of these articles. So I'm sure when I log into Facebook today, it's within the first 3 or 4 things I'm going to see is there's going to be a pop-up with probably a Screen Rant or a comicbook.com article. Who is the mysterious contact?
You're right. I was going to say, Facebook's got you covered.
Get fucked, Bradley.
Anyway, so I wrote down in my notes, obviously their contact is Jar Jar. That's my theory for this.
Well, that would be interesting. That would be an interesting angle to take.
I mean, here's the thing. We need to bring him back in some way. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to find different dumb ass ways to shoehorn him back into the series because I genuinely believe if you bring him back now, this is the time because all those kids who watch the prequels are adults now. They would fucking love it.
Well, he's back in the Clone Wars and he's fantastic in the Clone Wars. And Ahmad Best clearly has a good working relationship with Lucasfilm because he did that kid show. Like he loves over 20 years fans have really come around on it. He loves interacting with the fans. He got a standing ovation at Celebration one year. You know, people have really come around to the fact that he deserves a lot of praise. And part of the reason that I find the treatment of his character in episodes 2 and 3 kind of distasteful is because I felt like the character was minimized due to that fan backlash.
Right.
So it's good to see the character is getting a little bit more love. And the actor in particular deserves a lot of credit for the work that he did. So it would be awesome to see him come back.
I would love to. Plus, I also kind of want to see an updated, like, how they would do it, right? Like, would they use CGI or would they do a mixture of CGI and practical? Like, I don't know how they would do it. I kind of would be curious to see that.
We know from the Aftermath trilogy that he ends up, by the time the Empire falls, he's blamed for initially proposing the emergency measures in the first place that would eventually lead to the Empire. Mm-hmm. And he winds up being like a street performer. My view on that particular interlude has softened because when I originally read it, I went, this is
stupid.
Not stupid. This is pretty like heartbreaking for this character. But like the way the short story ends, like the idea is, well, you know, he brings joy to children, which is all he ever really wanted to do, which I've kind of softened my stance on that interlude where I'm like, you know, it's a nice way of reaffirming that, you know, he was there to entertain kids. As long as he entertains kids, he's you know, kind of doing his.
Okay, fine. But let's say, for argument's sake, maybe he's just helping start the rebellion with Rex or something. Like, that's what he's really known for.
It's entirely possible. Now, I have a few theories of my own.
What are your theories? Because I wrote down Jar Jar, obviously, but then I wrote down more likely, possibly, and then maybe.
So when I first saw it and I saw the way that, because I freeze framed on the hologram. I went back and freeze framed on it.
Okay.
It's a small number because it is referred to as a he. So that rules out people like Ahsoka,
right?
Mon Mothma. There's certain characters that are kind of ruled out. If it hadn't been a he, I would have immediately thought it was Ahsoka because that would just make sense. On the other hand, as I say this out loud,
it could be her in the robe.
It could be her in the robe.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, when Fulcrum shows up in season 1, they're wearing like this robe and the voice is distorted.
It could be her. I mean,
it could be Ahsoka.
I didn't even have her on my list, but you're right. It could be her.
Now that I say it out loud, I'm like, actually, the way the robe kind of comes out, because first I thought it might be a Jedi. So it might be it might be a Jedi that's doing it. Second thought was it might be Bail Organa.
That was my thought,
there's really no way that somebody as important as Bail Organa is going to want to risk revealing himself to a couple of teenage smugglers. So now that I'm thinking about it,
it could be Ahsoka.
I really think it's Ahsoka in her fulcrum disguise.
So now that's all assuming when Rafa says, somebody who's trying to stop the Empire is a good person, right? Because just because you're trying to stop the Empire doesn't mean you're a good person.
Could be Saw Gerrera.
That was my more likely category, is what I said. It was probably Saw, because he's kind of, in that phase right now of recruiting and trying to start people. I had a kind of a more fun one. Now that we've kind of established timeline-wise, one of mine random ones is not convenient anymore because I think she's too young. So I don't think it would work. But I said it could have been like Infus Nest or something because it was like the start of the rebellion.
It could be Infus Nest's mother.
That was my
right. Because my explanation. Infus Nest is like implied in Solo to be passed down from mother to daughter.
Right. That's what I thought. So I thought maybe that could be it. But if we're going to go even more evil, I thought possibly Dryden Voss or someone at Crimson Dawn, because I don't think it's Maul, but I think it could be Dryden by this point because he's still kind of a lieutenant. So maybe he's recruiting people to do stuff, I don't know. But those are just some extra.
The fan theories are going to fly all week.
We could literally go on for hours, yeah.
I'm set in Ahsoka. I think it's Ahsoka.
You think it's Ahsoka? Okay. I mean, I like that because I do think we do see a bit of a white robe, but...
Although that would open up timeline questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure exactly at what point... That would answer questions how much time has passed since Clone Wars, the final season of Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. Has it been several months? In which case the Ahsoka novel, I think, takes place over the course of a few months.
Oh,
so
interesting.
She could just be starting out as Fulcrum. I have questions.
Well, you're going to have to read a lot of articles this weekend.
Or I'll just read the books because that's fun and I enjoy that. And I would rather stab myself repeatedly in the face than read some of these outlets.
I'm waiting for the article that's going to be like, they're talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi and the da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, all right.
That was a theory that briefly crossed my mind is, they might be talking to Obi-Wan, but I'm like, I discounted that pretty quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to go with, I like your Ahsoka theory because I'm assuming we're going to find out next week, but we may not.
Maybe not next week, but maybe later on in the series, we'll find out who they're talking to.
Right. Well, I'm going to stick with my Jar Jar theory for now. Until we know more, because why not? But I like your Ahsoka theory the best. I think the obvious choice, though, unfortunately, is Saw Gerrera, and I just don't think that's a very interesting choice, but that's probably the more likely choice.
Well, we're going to have to throw some credits down on it then. We're going to have to wager like those guys. And I think it's Ahsoka.
I was going to say, let's write down our theories right now because we'll have to remember that for later. And then that way we can go back once we find out, we'll be like, oh, Charles said Ahsoka and he was right. And then it's going to end up being Jar Jar. And I'm going to quit the podcast because I'm going to go work for Lucasfilm by that point because I'm going to be like, well, I already knew that that's what you guys wanted. So clearly I should be writing for you guys.
Bradley, do you have any final concluding thoughts on this episode?
Other than justice for Jar Jar, no, I really don't have anything else. I liked seeing the Martez sisters again. They'll probably return because if they were in, the final season of Clone Wars and now they're in this one, I don't see why they wouldn't return. The only other thing I didn't get to in my notes is that when we do see the kind of factory scene or whatever, we hear those droid factory noises from Clone Wars or Attack of the Clones. Which I actually like because that's one of my favorite prequel movies. So I just love that they do that. So
he likes Attack of the Clones, but not Resistance. I don't know what is wrong with your opinions on anything at all. All right, so that wraps it up for this week. If you want to keep up with what we're doing, you can follow us on Twitter at Goldsquadrongays. I am also using the Twitter account more to especially during the month of June, but I want to try to keep doing it. Highlight more queer Star Wars creators that I'm excitedly discovering. You can also follow us on Instagram at Goldsquadrongays. Bradley and I were discussing Twitter followers versus Instagram followers in the pre-meeting. Since I run the Twitter account and he runs the Instagram, I'm currently winning because we have more followers on Twitter than Instagram.
Shock.
And you can also check me out on Twitch at CWRogers6. I stream Star Wars games every Monday to coincide with the release of the podcast. And we will see you guys next week to find out
if Rex is finally going to fucking show up in
this
goddamn show.
If Rex is finally going to show up in this goddamn show. Watch, it's going to be like the end of the season is when he shows up.
It's exactly what's going to happen. I know it. It's just like some stupid ass. They're going to wait till the last second. Alrighty.
We will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
If it turns out to be Saw Gerrera, I have to purchase you 2 Funko Pops. But if it turns out to be Ahsoka, you have to purchase the Ahsoka and Maul Lego set.
All right. Well, then I wrote it down.
If neither of us are wrong, we'll
still buy those things anyway.
We'll still buy those things.
We'll still buy them. We just won't buy them for each other. We'll just still buy them, though.